In his book, The Brief Tour of Human Consciousness, V.S. Ramachandran, he's a neuroscientist, argues that there's no separate mind stuff and physical stuff in the universe. The two are one in the same. Don't let me lose you as I go through some of this stuff to begin my sermon. Another neuroscientist, Damasio, he argues that it's probably safe to say that by 2050, sufficient knowledge of biological phenomena will have wiped out the traditional dualistic separations of body-brain, body-mind, and brain-mind. It's a Scientific American article. Ramachandran actually goes so far as to argue that all of the social sciences will eventually be wrapped into neuroscientific inquiry as we learn more and more about how the brain experiences things like art, like philosophy, so that scientific inquiry will involve the arts and artistic inquiry will involve the sciences. Okay. So, what does this mean? Well, we're not out of the woods yet. There's going to be some more delightful academic stuff. Rowan Williams, who is an archbishop for many years, the Archbishop of Canterbury, he argues that, he says, the issue of when the soul enters the body is a complete red herring. The body is the soul. That is, the body does not become intelligent, purposeful, endowed with feeling, and so on because something is added to it. This is what the body is, a meaning proportion of matter. When we run or move our limbs, it is not the action of a disembodied mind exerting power over matter, but rather we ourselves are moving ourselves. We are to understand ourselves not as invisible souls contained within a mortal coil, but to see ourselves as meaningful matter. That's what Rowan Williams argues. He says, being a body is a spiritual discipline, just as being spiritual is finding a way of living fully and gratefully as a body. The sciences are calling us to live as bodies that are mindful, bodies that are intelligent, bodies that are spiritual. We're living in a world where our own life experience sees that there's very much a blurring of a lot of these lines, in perhaps ways that human societies didn't used to see a blurring. We see people struggling with mental illness. And for hundreds of years, we'd say, well, there's something wrong with their soul. They must be possessed by a demon. That's why they're doing those things. And now we use language like mental illness to say that no, there are chemicals that are in their brain that are causing them to be filled with despair, with sadness, a lot of things. We don't have the same dualistic sense of our minds and our bodies anymore in the way that most of us live our lives. And so a lot of Christians are thinking about what that means. And I would suggest to you that this means a lot of very powerful things about how we live our lives as Christians that can enrich our lives. And to be honest, correct some of the biggest challenges that Christians have in our world today. For example, eating food. Our whole faith centers around the Holy Eucharist. What does it mean for us to be fully mindful of every moment that we eat? There's a great temptation. I certainly felt it when I lived alone for many years to see food as mere fuel. It's just calories. It's just sugars and proteins, and I have to eat a certain amount of each one of those things to keep my machine, my body, functioning at an optimal level. And I'll tell you, when I was eating, I hate eating by myself. I really dislike it. And so I would just eat as mechanical as possible. I would eat very quickly. And there was no sense in my life that eating could be sacred, that eating could feed my soul and my mind as well as my body. I wonder how many in our society do the same thing, where food is becoming, ceasing to become an opportunity to become one, not just with other people that we're eating with, but to recognize that we are in profound relationship with other creatures and our environment whenever we eat something that has come from our environment. I wonder how mindful we are of what we eat. Many people can be similarly detached with issues around and with their sexual lives. It's the same thing. Well, I have this animal that I have to take care of, and I have these animal urges, and I'll put them over here, and sometimes I have to deal with that, but I'm really a soulful, profound person, and I'm a really loving person, but sometimes I have these animal urges that I'd rather not talk about, and I certainly don't want to hear the priest talk about it. But that certainly isn't our life experience, and that's certainly not the lives that we're called to live. We're called to live a life where our bodies and our souls and our minds can all be sexual beings. That's something that we're called to be. We shouldn't be ashamed of our bodies. God certainly does not call us to be ashamed. Living in harmony with the environment. It's the same thing. There are a lot of Christians, especially with certain denominations, I don't know how to... Anyways, there are certain Christians who make the argument that eventually the rapture is going to come, and since we're all spiritual beings, we're going to go to this spiritual place that's heaven, and we're going to leave this earth that has never done us any favors. This is the mindset. There's a real danger in when we detach our souls and our minds from our bodies, that we cease to be active participants of creation. God has given us this creation to love. We are a part of it. We are a part of an ecosystem. And I believe that there can be a danger if we detach our minds from our bodies, that we associate our bodies with this planet, with creation, and our minds and our souls with something sacred and holy and of heaven. And a lot of Christians can get in the mindset of, I'm sure I'm here on earth right now, a planet that's filled with a lot of violence and disease, but eventually I'm going to leave this planet and go to heaven where everything is holy, and I'll be out of my body that is now causing me physical pain and discomfort, and I'll be in heaven with God, and I won't have to worry about this planet anymore. There's a danger that our faith can do that to us, and we cease to live in a world filled with wonder. We cease to love the created order around us. We cease to recognize that we're breathing the same air that humans thousands and thousands of years ago had breathed. We're drinking the same water that dinosaurs drank millions of years ago. We're a part of a beautiful lattice of life on this planet. And there is a danger that if we see the world through the lens of a separation of body and soul, that we run the risk of detaching from our lives and our life. Finally, and this hit me particularly close to home, and Rowan Williams emphasized this in particular, he argued that we have to stop looking at disease and sickness as a war. He saw a deep danger with seeing our bodies, especially if we're struggling with illness or chronic pain, or if we had a limb amputated. He sees a great danger in seeing a war between our minds and who we think we are and our bodies that have betrayed us. He sees a great danger for that. We're called to love and live in our bodies. And as our bodies change, so do we. As our souls and our minds change, so do our bodies. There can be something profound and deeply challenging about living with the fact that our bodies are meaningful, that our actions have meaning. What we eat, who we love, where we go, how we treat our creation, how we treat our own bodies, especially in times of illness and difficulty. all those actions have meaning. How we live affects our souls. What is happening in our souls can affect our bodies. Finding meaning in that can be a lot of work, but what profound joy there can be in living in every moment of our lives. I think it's an important challenge for us as Christians. I don't know where each of you are. I think we're certainly living in a world where people are becoming more embodied, and I suppose I'm concerned that Christianity, in a sense, might be preventing us from living more fully in our bodies in creation. I'm worried that we might have a faith that might be overemphasizing something about an immortal soul and maybe even blocking us from seeing some of the great challenges of our time. Environmental challenges as we're trying to address mental health, our culture, the challenge of violence, learning to live in a world where that's increasingly filled with sexual imagery. I'm worried that we find solace in saying, well, that's the physical world, and there's a lot of problems, but I live in a spiritual world because I'm a Christian, and so I don't have to deal with all of those challenges. I think the church is saying to us today that that's no longer the case, that all these things have meaning, that God has given us a life on this planet. Remember that you are dust, and to dust you will return. We are formed from the earth. These are things that are filled in our tradition, and I'm worried that we're not taking heed of those things, and I worry that we might live out our lives trying to detach from some great challenges, and in the process we might be detaching from great joy and wonder and mystery and meaning. Amen.